On the towering mountaintop, Qin Nan stood in front of several huge figures, waving his hand, and thousands of troops and horses surged out like a flood. Who is the born king? Keywords of the novel. The Emperor Guardian Spirit of Zhenhun Street without a pop-up window, the complete collection download of the Emperor Guardian Spirit of Zhenhun Street TXT, and the latest chapter reading of the Emperor Guardian Spirit of Zhenhun Street. Chapter 1. My naming Zheng. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 1. My naming Zheng. At night, the city center of Liang is still brightly lit and bustling with people amidst the darkness. The old city area near the suburbs is exceptionally peaceful, in stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of the city center. There is an ancient street in the old city area called Wui Street, which is said to have existed for thousands of years, but the exact duration cannot be verified. There are no high-rise buildings on Wui Street, but more residential buildings with 5 or 6 floors, as well as antique restaurants and restaurants. At this moment, there was no one above Wui Street, and the surrounding houses were also in darkness. On the empty street, there were only dim yellow street lights. In an alley, more than 10 figures appeared one after another, moving towards a certain place. Under the dim yellow light, their cold metal surfaces shimmered with cold light, and their eyes shimmered with red light. This is actually a group of mecha warriors. A low male voice rang out in the ears of a mecha warrior led by him. Did you find the target? The mecha soldier kept flashing various messages in his sight, gradually locking onto a certain house in a residential building and saying, the target has been determined, we are at home. Do you want to take action? A deep male voice came from the mech earphones again. Take action. Qin Nan is an ordinary high school student who has lived in Wui Street since childhood. His family is neither wealthy nor poor. My parents run a small restaurant on the street and the business is also good. Qin Nan, who grew up in a restaurant, learned how to cook from a young age and his craftsmanship is quite good. During school holidays, he would guest cook at his own restaurant and earn a considerable salary from his father. The Qin family, who had been busy at the restaurant all day today, fell asleep early because of the busy day, and now they are sleeping soundly. Bang! Qin Nan, lying in bed, was awakened by the sound of the door breaking, and when he opened his eyes, he found several more figures in his room. The moonlight reflected outside the window fell on the figures, and Qin Nan realized that they were not actually humans, but a group of mecha warriors. He panicked and said, What are you doing? Why are you coming to my house? The mecha warrior in the room ignored Qin Nan's panic and instead surrounded him tightly. One of the mecha warriors looked at Qin Nan, constantly displaying Qin Nan's information. After confirming Qin Nan's identity, he said to his headphones, Target confirmation. A slightly excited voice came from across the earphones. Quick! Bring him back to me. Command received. 2 mecha soldiers immediately stepped forward and raised Qin Nan. Qin Nan has developed considerable strength through long-term practice in cooking, and is considered a person of great strength among his peers. But he still has no resistance in the hands of these 2 mecha warriors. He could only keep shouting loudly, What exactly do you want to do? Put me down quickly. At this moment, the door to the side suddenly opened, and Qin Nan's father Qin Yu woke up and came out of the room. Discovering that this group of strange people wanted to kidnap his son, he couldn't help but roar, What are you doing? Without hesitation, Qin Yu picked up a kitchen knife and rushed out to chop towards the mech warrior. The mecha warrior's eyes flickered with red light, and a mechanical and mature sound came out. Discovered interference. Clear it. Qin Nan also heard this voice and shouted to Qin Yu with all his might, Dad! Run! After receiving instructions, the other mecha soldiers suddenly transformed their mechanical palms into firearms and fired at Qin Yu without any hesitation. Bang! Bang! Fireworks flickered, and after a few gunshots, Qin Yu lay in a pool of blood, his kitchen knife slipping from his hand to the ground, making a crisp sound. Ah! Qin Nan watched in despair as his father collapsed, his body carried by the mecha warrior like a dead dog. At this moment, Qin Nan's mother also ran out of the room. Old Qin. How can we get back? She saw Qin Yu in the pool of blood, and her voice suddenly stopped abruptly. Looking at everything happening in the room with disbelief. After discovering Qin Nan's mother again, the mecha warrior did not hesitate to fire again in Qin Nan's desperate gaze. You all deserve to die. Qin Nan kept kicking and beating the mecha soldiers, tears pouring out like a burst flood. Ah! Qin Nan surprisingly didn't know how to break free from the hands of the mecha warrior, and crazily picked up things in the room and randomly smashed them at the mecha warrior. In a dark room, a man looks at the screen and issues commands to the mecha warrior. Don't hurt him. The muzzle that the mecha warrior had originally planned to lift turned back into a palm after receiving instructions, and he grabbed Qin Nan again. Qin Nan kept dodging and ran to his parents' room, picking up everything and throwing it fiercely at them. He picked up a box from his father's bookshelf and smashed it at the mech warrior. The mecha warrior casually blocked the box and it fell to the ground, revealing something resembling a seal inside. The mecha warrior took 2 steps to approach Qin Nan, grabbed his arm with one hand, and dragged it out. Qin Nan paid no attention to the pain in his arms and frantically pounded the steel body of the mecha warrior with his fists. 1 punch. 2 fists. 3 fists. Qin Nan's fist crazily landed on the mecha, his eyes turning red, and his once delicate face twisted terrifyingly at this moment. Go to hell. The mecha warrior didn't pay attention to Qin Nan's attack and dragged him towards the window. Qin Nan's broken fist continuously dripped blood onto the ground, forming a long bloodstain as the mech soldiers dragged it. A few drops of blood dripped onto the seal on the ground as Qin Nan struggled frantically. The seal suddenly flickered with golden light, emitting a huge power that shook all the mecha warriors in the room away. The mecha warriors fell to the ground, circuit sparks flickered, and then lost movement. Qin Nan was also knocked to the ground, forgetting to struggle as he looked at his parents' bodies, his gaze wandering and motionless. The seal, which was originally emitting light, suddenly appeared with several figures floating in the room and began to communicate. This kid belongs to your family, right? You shut up for me. Hee hee. Does he seem to be dying? You don't need to worry about it. You rebellious people. I don't like to hear your words anymore. Your son is not up to par and blames us. The other figures also nodded in agreement. The original discussion about Qin Nan turned into an argument. Humph. A figure let out a cold snort, ignoring them. He transformed into a huge figure and appeared in the real world after a burst of light. Due to the insufficient height of the room, he could only crouch on the ground, looking quite comical. Ha ha ha. Those figures laughed heartily as they watched him look like this. The huge figure looked at them angrily and said, "Believe it or not, I will execute your 9 tribes." Hee hee. The huge figure suddenly thought of something and looked at them again. The spiritual energy in the jade seal is about to dissipate. Hurry up and enter Qin Nan's body, otherwise no one will want to survive. Those figures hovered for a moment, but ultimately did not refuse. They longed for the human world and did not want to disappear from this world, so they transformed into light and shadow and disappeared into Dao Qin Nan's body. There was still a voice lingering in the air. Zheng. If there wasn't nowhere to go, we wouldn't have chosen your descendants. If he disappoints us, don't blame us for being impolite. I don't have any objections, but if this kid doesn't have enough ability, I won't help him either. The huge figure ignored them and, after watching them enter Qin Nan's body, suddenly realized something and angrily said, "Rat generation. How dare you peep?" He emitted several rays of light towards the mecha on the ground, and the mecha warriors in the room turned into ashes and disappeared. In a dark room, the man's back was cold from the gaze of the huge figure. The man stared blankly at the screen in front of him, which had no screen left. Nan said, it's actually him. A strong man suddenly entered Qin Nan's house from the window and looked at the chaotic scene and the huge figure in Qin Nan's house. He said, "Guardian Spirit." Surprisingly, in the attack of the kingdom organization, the Guardian Spirit was summoned. The strong man recognized the tall figure at a glance as the Guardian Spirit of Qin Nan. The Guardian Spirit of Qin Nan turned his head to look at the sudden strong man and felt the inside of his body. Lingli said, "Kid, are you the soul-suppressing general?" The strong man looked at the attire of Qin Nan's Guardian Spirit, with a look of suspicion and contemplation in his eyes, but without asking, he just nodded at him. "Okay, take me to your town Soul Street." The Guardian Spirit waved at the bodies of Qin Nan's parents, and their bodies suddenly turned into two ashes, automatically flying into two antique blue and white porcelain vases used for decoration in the living room. The strong man did not refuse the request of the Guardian Spirit and took the lead in jumping out of the window. The giant figure of the Guardian Spirit then left here with the ashes of Qin Nan and his parents. The home, which was originally not very wealthy but full of happiness, has now become dilapidated and fragmented. After the barrier of Wui Street, in the deserted and secluded street, the strong man looked at Qin Nan's Guardian Spirit inexplicably and said, "Which emperor are you?" He still had some speculations in his heart, but still couldn't believe it. At this moment, Qin Nan also woke up and saw two people standing in front of him. They were tall and at least 2 meters tall, wearing tight white shirts, and their muscles were bulging all over. The other figure was even taller, like a giant, standing over 5 meters tall. He wore a crown on his head and a black robe embroidered with golden 5-clawed golden dragons, dressed in imperial attire. The tall figure dressed in the emperor's attire was now speaking to the strong man, "My name is Zheng. First Emperor of the Great Qin. P.S. Let me explain the issue of the protagonist's surname specifically. Why is the protagonist surnamed Qin a descendant of Qin Shi Huang? In history, after the death of Emperor Shi Huang, the royal family of the Great Qin dynasty, who crazily washed away other children of Zheng for the throne, forcing many young masters and princesses to flee and hide their names. Of course, why not surname Zhao? This is because many readers do not know that Zheng is the Ying surname of the Zhao family, which makes them uncomfortable to read. Those who know about it also have a general understanding of the change of surname by the descendants of Zheng, and can accept the protagonist's surname. Therefore, thank you. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Another World. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Another World. The Guardian Spirit of Qin Nan, dressed in the emperor's attire, looked at the strong man and said, "My name is Zheng. First Emperor of Great Qin." The strong man took several steps back in a row, his face full of disbelief, and murmured, "It's really you." Zheng's face was obscured by a crown, making it difficult to detect, but his voice contained an angry expression. "Now that you know it's me, why don't you kneel down?" A deep voice rang out from Qin Nan's body, but the strong man and Qin Nan beside him could not hear it. "Your great Qin has already died, what are you pretending to be?" Zheng glared angrily, seeming to see through Qin Nan's body. His gaze met someone and he said, "Lu family child, shut up." At this moment, a charming female voice also came. "Brother Zheng is so handsome." At this moment, another angry voice came from within Qin Nan's body, which was equally majestic but also carried a hint of simplicity, "Wu Zhao. Stop talking to me. Do you think it's not enough to embarrass me?" The coquettish female voice just gave a cold snort, but she didn't say anything. That majestic yet somewhat simple voice came again, but at this moment it was like an old farmer, without a trace of the same majesty as before. "You keep going. Don't worry about us." The strong man couldn't hear the voice inside Qin Nan's body, inexplicably looking at Zheng as if he was talking to himself, but he didn't know what he was saying. Qin Nan finally regained his senses and remembered everything that had happened at home, with an uncontrollable anger in his eyes. He knew that the person in front of him had saved him and forced himself to calm down. "Thank you very much for saving me, but could you tell me who sent those mecha warriors to my house and killed my parents?" Zheng looked at the strong man and gestured for him to explain everything that had happened to Qin Nan. Zheng doesn't want to be a confidant who comforts people's hearts. Without waiting for the strong man to refuse, his figure dissipated and disappeared. The strong man looked at the place where Zheng had dissipated for a moment, but still answered Qin Nan, "Judging from the remnants of the mecha in your home, it should be sent by the kingdom organization. And they have been searching for spirit senders in the human world, attempting to deprive them of their guardian spirits. And you also meet their criteria." Qin Nan didn't know what the kingdom organization was, but he still firmly remembered this name in his mind. Whether it was true or false, at least he had a goal. Kingdom organization. Qin Nan raised his head again and said to the strong man with a puzzled expression in his eyes, "Sending spirits. Guarding spirits. What is that?" Facing Qin Nan's questioning, the strong man was not angry and explained carefully, "Let me start from scratch for you." Regardless of whether Qin Nan agreed or not, he continued, "Our world is divided into the human world and the underworld. The human world is the world of the living, and the underworld is the world of the dead. The place where you are now is the transit station between the human world and the underworld, called the spiritual realm. The spiritual realm is the place where undead beings who have not been transcended stay, but some undead beings gradually give up their inner beauty and degenerate into evil spirits due to waiting for transcendence for a long time. At this time, people like me must come out to stop them. The reason why we humans can also exist in the spiritual realm is because we need to deal with evil spirits, eliminate them, and maintain order here, and we rely on guardian spirits to deal with them. Guardian spirit refers to a spiritual body that is possessed by a certain medium, with a strong attachment to people or things. After passing away, the soul refuses to leave, and then reaches an agreement with humans who possess spiritual energy. Yin and Yang coexist to become the guardian spirit. The person who possesses a guardian spirit is a spirit sender. Got it. Qin Nan seemed to understand and said, "So I am a spirit sender." The strong man said, "Yes. Is that giant my guardian spirit just now? Can I ask him to avenge me?" The strength of the guardian spirit is determined by your own strength. As long as you become stronger, you can seek revenge. Qin Nan said, "Is it powerful?" Raising his head and eyes filled with hatred, his voice carried a few strands of prayer, "Can you tell me how to become stronger?" The strong man looked up and down at Qin Nan, who was almost 1.8 meters old and had a delicate face that made it difficult to distinguish his exact age. "How old are you?" Qin Nan hesitated for a moment and answered honestly, "I'm 16 years old." The strong man nodded and said, "It's okay, I'm not very old, so I'll take you to Dead Soul Island." Dead Soul Island. Qin Nan continued to ask, "Can it become stronger there?" The strong man thought thoughtfully and said, "Of course. That's where the spirit senders become stronger." "Are you going?" "I'll go." Wui Street, on a certain hillside, Qin Nan placed his parents' ashes here and knocked several heads heavily before sitting on the hillside in a daze. The strong man walked over to Qin Nan and sat down, watching him. "Let me introduce myself to you. My name is Qin Feng and I am the sole calming general of this street without clothes." Qin Nan turned to look at him and said, "Soul suppressing general." Qin Feng thought for a moment, but it seemed that he had not yet explained to him what a soul-suppressing general was. So he spoke up and said, "There are countless channels between the spiritual realm and the human realm. Undead spirits who are temporarily unable to go to the underworld are placed in these channels, forming a presence similar to the streets of the human realm. These places are called Zhenhun Street. And there is a soul-suppressing general in every soul-suppressing street, and I am the soul-suppressing general in Wui Street." Qin Nan continued, "So why are you helping me?" Qin Feng thought for a moment and said, "I won't hide it from you either. Actually, we should be considered relatives." "Relatives? Why don't I know? Because the spiritual realm will use spiritual power to eliminate memories of humans who are unable to cultivate spiritual power, and then send them back to the human realm, becoming an ordinary person in the human realm. Qin Feng turned his head to look at Qin Nan and continued, "Your father was sent out by me. He is also my younger brother." What? Qin Nan stood up in shock to look at Qin Feng. Qin Feng, however, rested his hands behind his head and lay on the grass, gazing at the distant sky. There will be evil spirits invading Wui Street at any time. He is just an ordinary person. If I am not by his side, he will die here at any time. For his safety, I can only send him back to the human world. Due to the regulations of the spiritual realm, the sender of spirits cannot freely contact ordinary people, so I have never seen him again after seeing him off. But I didn't expect that you were also a spirit sender, and you were also targeted by the kingdom organization. Qin Nan was a bit angry and said, "Why didn't you come earlier? If you came earlier, my parents wouldn't have died." Qin Feng seemed to be muttering to himself, "Yes. Why didn't I go earlier? I should have gone to see you more. I should have guessed that this inexplicable invasion of evil spirits must have a purpose, but I never thought they were trying to stop me from rescuing you." As soon as Qin Nan finished speaking, he regretted it. Although the man in front of him was his uncle, he had no reason to blame him. He had his duty, and if he wanted to blame him, he could only blame himself. Then he thought of that tall figure, who should be his guardian spirit. My guardian spirit has always been on me, why doesn't he take action? Qin Nan turned around and searched everywhere, shouting, "Guardian spirit! Come out of here!" Inside Qin Nan's body, Lu Che looked at Zheng with ill intentions and said, "Your descendants are calling you." Of course, Zheng knew why Qin Nan was shouting at him, but he was too lazy to explain to Qin Nan. Instead, he glared angrily at Lu Che and said, "You naughty descendant! Can you stop provoking me? Isn't it okay to squat quietly on one side?" Li Er, with a warm smile, squatted in the corner without making a sound. He had long been accustomed to their mutual hostility. Wu Zhao, on the other hand, looked at Zheng and Lu Che with glowing eyes. She never tired of their mutual hostility. Suddenly, Wu Zhao felt a chill behind her. Sure enough, Li Er kept looking at her coldly for some time. He always did. Yang Guang in the corner mustered up courage and wanted to speak out to regulate the atmosphere. As soon as he opened his mouth, Lu Che and Zheng looked back at him and said together, "You loser, you have no right to speak." Yang Guang squatted down aggrieved, his eyes angry as he looked at Li Er, who looked like a kind-hearted person beside him, all blaming him. Li Er felt Yang Guang's gaze and said happily, "Is there anything wrong?" Yang Guang. Humph. Wui Street, on a certain hillside. Qin Nan called several times, but Zheng's figure did not appear. He sat down on the grass again in disappointment. Qin Feng saw Qin Nan sitting down again and waited for him to calm down before saying, "Shao Nan, show great respect to His Majesty the First Emperor." "Why?" "Because your surname is Qin." Qin Nan lowered his head and let out a long sigh, explaining, "I just wanted to ask him why he didn't come out earlier." Qin Feng had a look that I knew was like this and said, "You can't blame him. The appearance of the guardian spirit in the human world is up to you, not him. In the end, his appearance was also triggered by your subconscious spiritual energy, otherwise if you die, he wouldn't be able to appear, yeah. It's me." Qin Nan lowered his head, "If it weren't for me, my parents wouldn't have died either. It's all my fault. Me." Qin Nan's eyes turned red and his voice had a hint of choking. Thinking of the once happy home, thinking of the always strict father and seemingly verbose mother. He clenched his fist and stood up, his eyes fixed on the sky, shouting loudly, "I want revenge." Inside Qin Nan's body, Lu Che looked at Qin Nan's figure and exclaimed with some emotion, "Zheng, your descendants still have some ambition and have not been defeated. Well, the qualifications are also barely qualified in Zheng. Of course, you have to tell me. How could my descendants of Ying Zheng be inferior? Li Er on the side still had a smiling expression, while Ying Zheng and Lu Che habitually ignored him. Lu Che's voice rang in Ying Zheng's ear again, with a hint of mockery as he said, yes. Refers to deer as horses. You shut up. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Dead Soul Island. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Dead Soul Island. Qin Nan was surrounded by turbulent seas, with no visible end at all. At this moment, he was standing on a small boat. Qin Feng's Wui Street has recently become the most frequently invaded soul street by evil spirits. He cannot personally teach Qin Nan, so he can only send him to the Dead Soul Island. Qin Feng held a pole and stood at the bow of the boat, controlling the direction. Under Qin Feng's control, the small boat remained as stable as a mountain in the face of the surging waves. However, Qin Nan watched from behind with fear that Qin Feng's mistake would cause the small boat to capsize on the sea. Although he can swim, his water quality is not good enough to survive in such a turbulent sea. The unknown and profound ocean always gives people fear. Qin Nan spent his entire journey in constant fear, until a faint black dot appeared on the distant sea surface. Qin Nan was pleasantly surprised and said to Qin Feng, "Uncle, is that what you called the Dead Soul Island?" Qin Feng didn't lift his head and said, "That's right, Xiaonan. I'll tell you, it's difficult to come out of Dead Soul Island once you enter, unless your strength meets their standards. If you don't, the consequences will be very serious." Qin Nan clenched his fist and faced the sea breeze, firmly saying to Qin Feng, "I'm not afraid. If I can't avenge my parents, I'll never come out and die in it for the rest of my life." Qin Feng said, "Don't put so much pressure, isn't there still your uncle? When you come out, let's work together to level the kingdom organization." The small boat ultimately did not capsize and safely arrived at Dead Soul Island, stopping at a rudimentary wooden dock. The Dead Soul Island is not big, and there is only the Dead Soul Tower standing on the island. From a distance, Qin Nan didn't feel anything, but when he arrived at the Dead Soul Island, he found that the tower towered into the sword, breaking through the clouds and into the sky. Qin Nan looked at the Death Soul Pagoda, and the overwhelming pressure almost made him gasp for breath. The waves around Death Soul Island kept hitting the rocks, shattering and splashing. Qin Feng and Qin Nan stood silently on the dock waiting, without going up to the Dead Soul Island. I don't know how long it took, but more and more people around Qin Nan, but most of them were children. The older ones were about the same size as Qin Nan, about 15 or 16 years old, while the younger ones were only around 6 or 7 years old. As the number of people increased, the already narrow wooden dock became increasingly crowded. Qin Nan was afraid of the dock collapsing and wanted to stand on the island. There was not a single person there, enough for him to stay there. Qin Feng tightly grabbed him and gently shook his head at him, gesturing not to go to the island. Any act of going to the island without permission will be considered an invasion. Suddenly, the sound of ringing bells echoed from the tower. Dang! 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 Just as Qin Nan was feeling a bit off topic, the voice of Qin Feng's explanation also came from one side. This is the tradition of Dead Soul Island. As long as a new person comes, the bell will ring in the Dead Soul Tower, and then the instructors will come out and endure for a moment. Sure enough, the gate of the tall tower also opened after the bell rang. 3 burly men in black, who were not inferior to Qin Feng, walked out of the Dead Soul Tower and stood in the open space in front of the wooden dock, observing the group of people in Qin Nan. After a moment, one of the men loudly said, "All the newcomers are coming to the island." The crowd also began to move, and people kept going up to the island. Qin Feng gently pushed Qin Nan, who also stood on the empty ground in front of the Dead Soul Tower with the people around him. Everyone remained silent and waited quietly for the next action of the 3 men. At this moment, Qin Nan noticed that the small boat escorting them also began to slowly depart from the Dead Soul Island. His gaze turned towards Qin Feng, who was also looking at him on the small boat, giving him an encouraging smile. Then, he forcefully supported the pole in his hand, and the boat under his feet began to sail towards the direction it was coming from. After leaving, Qin Feng never looked back again. Qin Nan once again left his family, forcibly suppressing the sadness in his heart and striving not to cry. Some younger children beside him couldn't help but burst into tears, and several teenagers about the same age as Qin Nan also had red eyes, trying to hold back their tears. At this moment, one of the instructors suddenly roared, his voice like thunder, causing Qin Nan's ears to buzz. "Shut up, everyone!" Everyone suddenly fell silent, and the children looked at the instructor in fear. They were so timid that their whole bodies began to tremble. Tears kept swirling in their eyes, but they didn't fall. On the Death Soul Tower in the distance, crowds were crowded at many windows, everyone stretching their heads and constantly pointing at Qin Nan and the others, occasionally emitting a few sly laughter and arguments. After seeing Qin Nan and the others quiet down, the instructor cleared his throat and spoke again, but this time his voice was not as intimidating as before. "Welcome to Dead Soul Island. Now I have two things to tell you. All of you must keep them firmly in my memory. 1. Those who can come to the Dead Soul Island prove that you are the chosen ones by the Imperial Spirit Envoy and the candidates for the soul-suppressing generals. 2. This is also your only way out, because the people who can come here are all orphans because your parents have already died, so you have no other choice. Below, I will tell you the rules of this Dead Soul Island. Before the age of 18, you must all receive training here. If you do not meet our requirements by the time you turn 18, we will use our spiritual power to erase your memories and send you back to the human world as an ordinary person." A young man in the crowd couldn't help but ask the instructor, "Instructor, how can we leave here?" The instructor looked at him and sneered, "Leave? I'll tell you. Either you meet the requirements, we will send you away. Either you don't meet the requirements, we'll send you away." The young man complained softly, "That's just one way. Meet the requirements, otherwise your memory will be erased." "That's right. You understand correctly." The instructor said to the crowd again, "Now, have you all remembered it for me?" A group of people were just staring blankly at the instructor and didn't dare to answer. The instructor roared, "I'm asking you. Have you all memorized what I just said for me? Remember clearly." The answers in the crowd were scattered and not loud. The instructor roared again, "Did you remember Chu clearly for me?" This time, the sound was as loud as thunder at the beginning. This time everyone blushed and shouted loudly, "Remember clearly." The instructor nodded in satisfaction and said, "Okay, now everyone line up for me and enter the Death Soul Tower one by one." Inside Qin Nan's body, Lu Che saw the Dead Soul Tower through Qin Nan's gaze and couldn't help but sigh, "The Dead Soul Island is still like this." Yang Guang asked curiously in a low voice, "Have you been here before?" Poor Yang Guang, regardless of good or bad, is also a hero, and now he dare not even speak loudly. Zheng looked coldly at Lu Che and said to Yang Guang, "Maybe this thing was built by him. He likes building houses." Upon hearing Yang Guang's guilty heart settle down again, Li Er and Wu Zhao, who were standing beside him, averted their gaze. Lu Che chuckled and said, "What do you mean by me?" Zheng. Humph. Immediately stopped talking. Qin Nan was unaware of the conversation among the several guardians inside his body. After following the crowd into the Death Soul Tower, the door of the tower closed again, and the door shaft creaked. I heard Qin Nan grinding his back teeth fiercely. In front of him was an empty square, surrounded by many buildings. Looking up with a tattoo, he could see the sky at a glance. So this Dead Soul Tower doesn't have a lid. There are many young people around Qin Nan, constantly talking to each other and looking at them. The young men in the Dead Soul Island around them were all of the same age, dressed in fitted grey robes, with the hem of the robes just reaching the knees of their calves. The instructor waited for Qin Nan and all of them to arrive before speaking up. Now we will allocate rooms for you, distribute clothes, and then come here to gather as soon as you have finished organizing. After finishing speaking, the instructors left straight away, leaving Qin Nan and a group of people standing there dumbfounded, looking at each other. At this moment, several older teenagers walked over from the side, indicating that they were also apprentices, specifically responsible for assisting the instructor in handling the new apprentices. One of the teenagers said to Qin Nan, "Come with me." After he finished speaking, he didn't care whether Qin Nan followed or not, so he turned around and left. Qin Nan quickly followed up. The Dead Soul Tower has a total of 88 floors, and Qin Nan was taken to a room on the 8th floor. In Dead Soul Island, each person has a room. Qin Nan walked into his own room, which was not big, only a bedroom and a toilet. There is a bed in the bedroom, and the clothes assigned to him by Dead Soul Island have been placed on the bed. After changing into clothes, Qin Nan found himself on par with the other apprentices in the tower. "What are you dragging around for? Hurry up and come down." The voice of the instructor came from downstairs again, accompanied by the laughter of other apprentices watching the excitement. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Selection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Selection, very good. The instructor saw Qin Nan and the others gathering again on the square at the time he had set, and nodded in satisfaction. "Let me introduce myself first. My name is Wang Su, and I will be your exclusive instructor from now on. If you encounter any problems, you can come to me for help. Remember, it's anything. I not only solve your daily problems, but also teach you how to fight. You will have a total of 4 courses in the future. In addition to the combat I teach, there are also spiritual cultivation, spiritual history, and your favorite, human knowledge." When instructor Wang Su talked about human knowledge in this course, his smile on the face was quite strange, as if there was some conspiracy. If you cannot meet the requirements of Dead Soul Island at the age of 18, then the course of human knowledge will be the only wealth left to you by us and even the spiritual realm. So, people who think they don't have enough spiritual talent can choose to study the course of human knowledge instead of wasting time. You should know that apprentices who only choose the course of human knowledge can avoid studying other courses. Don't exhaust yourself from fighting physical training every day, nor do you have to sit in a boring position all day to feel the spiritual power in your body. And your treatment will be better than others, there will be better dormitories, and no one dares to bully you. You also have enough time to enjoy a better life. And for apprentices who only choose this course, when you leave the spiritual realm, we will also send you to college. There are no apprentices who only choose this course. If you cannot meet the requirements of the Dead Soul Island, you will be on your own in the future. Now, is anyone willing to choose to only study the course of human knowledge? If there is, take one step forward. I assure you again here. No one dares to make things difficult for you or bully you in the Dead Soul Tower. Instructor Wang Zuling's gaze kept scanning the group of people in Qin Nan, and those who were swept by his gaze unconsciously lowered their heads. They have already come into contact with the magical world of the spiritual realm. How could they be willing to become ordinary people and spend this life in mediocrity? How could they bear to live in such a wonderful and diverse world? Instructor Wang Su scanned the crowd several times in a row, but no one spoke up and stepped forward. Qin Nan seemed a bit disappointed when he saw Wang Su, and felt a bit strange in his heart. As a new instructor, shouldn't it be reasonable to hope that the more qualified people there are, the better? Why does he expect everyone to choose to give up from the beginning instead? Wang Su also noticed the puzzled expression in the crowd and didn't hide it. He said directly, "I know many of you must be very puzzled now. Why should I encourage you to be an ordinary person? Now, I'll tell you." The instructor said that the voice suddenly became serious. Although the soul-suppressing generals in the spirit domain are particularly scarce, we would rather lack them than overuse them. Rather than letting you work hard to cultivate in vain, it's better to let you give up earlier. Even if you barely pass the exam, becoming a soul-suppressing general in the future will still harm you, and it's also your own harm. Perhaps in the future, it will also affect your own guardian spirit and your soul-suppressing streak, and even the entire spiritual realm. This kind of thing is not very rare. Moreover, there are quite a few training places in the spirit domain, similar to the Death Soul Island, specifically responsible for controlling soul generals. Therefore, you don't need to think how important you are to the spirit domain. There are many of you in the spirit domain, but your life is only one. Now I'll give you one last chance to choose. The apprentice who only wants to choose human common sense immediately stands up for me. The group of people in Qin Nan were of different ages, and the younger children were all ignorant and didn't understand what was going on. Therefore, Wang Su's gaze did not look at them, but rather at Qin Nan and other teenagers over the age of 12. After a moment of silence in the crowd, the two teenagers walked out of the crowd trembling in the eyes of everyone. Wang Su saw them come out and his voice suddenly increased a bit. Is there anything else? I'll tell you. Apprentices over the age of 12 only have this one choice. As for apprentices under the age of 12, you don't have to worry. When you're 12, you'll still have one more chance to choose. Qin Nan stood silently in the crowd. No matter how much Wang Su tried to intimidate and entice him, he had no intention of standing out. If he stood out, his parents' grudges would be hopeless in this life, and in the future, he might even be forcibly erased by the group of instructors on the Dead Soul Island, which he could not accept in any way. Wang Su waited for a while but no one stood up again, so he waved to another instructor to take the two young men who stood up. The old apprentices gathered in the square, some of whom were overjoyed, some glared angrily at Qin Nan and others had a cold and indifferent expression. The old apprentices in Dead Soul Island have always had the habit of choosing a young man and betting on whether he chooses human common sense. At this moment, two apprentices among the onlookers were looking at Qin Nan with hopeful eyes, hoping that he could also stand out. After the two of them were taken away, Wang Su said, "Since you have all made a choice, the formal class will start tomorrow. Remember. When the bell rings, all of you must gather in the classroom. If one person is missing, Wang Su sneered at Qin Nan and the others, I will make you feel true happiness." Wang Su looked at the few girls again and said, the advantages of Dead Soul Island are not many, but one thing is particularly good. Gender equality. True gender equality, there is no distinction between men and women here. Several girls took several steps back in Wang Su's gaze, like frightened deer. As for whether they had any thoughts of regret in their hearts, no one knew. Now. Dissolve. When Wang Su's figure disappeared in the square, the new apprentices began to scatter. It's still early, and Qin Nan doesn't know where to go. He's ready to go back to his bedroom and rest for a while. He doesn't dare to wander around in the Dead Soul Tower alone. If he violates the rules, it wouldn't be troublesome. Qin Nan arrived at the staircase to prepare to go upstairs, but a figure appeared at the turning point above the staircase to block his way. He has yellow hair and is quite thin and weak. At this moment, he is looking at Qin Nan with a malicious expression. Qin Nan didn't know what the situation was and didn't want to cause trouble, so he prepared to turn around and leave, but there was also a young man behind him who blocked his retreat. His obese figure pushed the gray robe apart, causing him to clench his right hand and constantly rub against the palm of his left hand. Qin Nan's body has been relatively strong since childhood, with a height of nearly 1.8 meters, which is half a head higher than the two teenagers blocking the way around him. Therefore, he has no fear in his heart. What do you want to do? The skinny yellow-haired boy upstairs heard Qin Nan's words and gently twisted his neck, making a crisp sound. Don't do anything, it's just losing the bet. I'm a bit upset. I want you to vent my frustration, he said. Qin Nan felt uneasy and said, what does that mean? What do you think? Who wouldn't let you choose common sense in the human world? The obese boy completely blocked Qin Nan's retreat. After other apprentices who were preparing to go upstairs noticed the situation here, they all showed a good look at the play. The apprentices around also gathered and everyone stopped by. The fat man saw more and more people around him and was worried about bringing the instructor over. Although he wouldn't be punished, it was inevitable to be scolded. However, with so many apprentices watching, the fat man was still quite nervous and urged Huang Mao to say, "Old Huang, hurry up." Huang Mao also had some worries in his heart, but his face kept sneering and saying, "Okay, don't worry, it will be soon." As soon as he finished speaking, Huang Mao kicked his feet and rushed towards Qin Nan with his fists raised. Qin Nan reached out to catch Huang Mao's fist, but as soon as he touched it, he was knocked away and rolled several times on the ground. Qin Nan's face showed disbelief. Why is his strength so great? Huang Mao ignored Qin Nan's thoughts and jumped into the air, kicking Qin Nan on the ground. Qin Nan had no intention of forcefully resisting Huang Mao's kick this time. Thinking of his guardian spirit, he shouted, "Ying Zheng. Come out quickly." But there's nothing around. Qin Nan felt a little flustered and continued, "Ying Zheng. Emperor Shi. You come out." Bang! Qin Nan was kicked away again and fell heavily to the ground. The excruciating pain in his abdomen made him unable to get up. "Huang Di. Your guardian spirit's name is Huang Di. I haven't heard of it." Huang Mao crouched on Qin Nan with a hint of teasing, "Not bad, kid. So there's already a guardian spirit. By the way, I'll tell you something. You need to remember. The Dead Soul Island is surrounded by soul lock stones, so it is impossible to summon guardian spirits here." Huang Mao looked at Qin Nan's unwilling gaze and said, "What? Not convinced?" Then he kicked Qin Nan again. At this moment, the fat man beside him was also in high spirits and ran quickly towards Qin Nan, shouting to Huang Mao, "Let me do it too, kid. Eat my human flesh missile." Huang Mao saw the fat man running over quickly and quickly dodged. The fat man approached Qin Nan and his obese body leaped high, ready to press heavily against Qin Nan on the ground. Qin Nan looked at the fat man's nearly 300-pound body and couldn't imagine being pressed under him. He felt the potential in his body stimulated and instantly gained some strength, so he suppressed the pain and rolled on the ground. Bang! The fat man's body fell heavily to the ground, causing dust to fly in the air. The apprentices around felt the ground shake a few times. "Ouch!" the fat man exclaimed in pain. At this moment, a black-clad instructor in the distance noticed the situation here and shouted loudly. "What are you doing? Aren't you practicing?" Upon hearing the voice of the instructor, Huang Mao glared angrily at Qin Nan and pulled up the chubby man who was howling on the ground to run upstairs. Other people, seeing that there was no good scene, dispersed and left one after another. The instructor had no intention of coming over, as if speaking just now was for routine purposes. If it weren't for worrying about Qin Nan being crushed to death by that fat guy, he wouldn't have spoken up to stop him. After everyone had left, Qin Nan painfully propped up his body and slowly got up from the ground, supporting the wall and limping towards his dormitory. Qin Nan gritted his teeth tightly, not allowing himself to show any signs of grievance or weakness. He secretly swore in his heart, "From now on, I will not allow anyone to treat me like this again. Today's humiliation will be repaid someday." Inside Qin Nan's body, Lu Che looked at Qin Nan and teased Ying Zheng, "Ying Zheng, your little boy is about to cry. Why don't you go out and comfort him?" Ying Zheng ignored Lu Che and continued to cultivate on his own. Lu Che felt quite bored, his gaze crossed over Li Er and Wu Zhao, and fell onto Yang Guang in the corner, where he smiled maliciously. Wu Zhao immediately showed an expression of enjoying the show. Li Er, however, didn't care about anything else and still looked at Wu Zhao with a bitter hatred. Yang Guangdan received Lu Che's gaze and his whole body trembled unconsciously. He turned to Li Er for help and said, "Sun.in.law. Take advantage of me. Before Li Er could speak, Wu Zhao shouted loudly. Although this is a fact, how could she be willing to become the one with the lowest seniority? Moreover, considering the social atmosphere at that time, seniority was not so important, and some ministers even accepted each other's daughters as concubines. Wu Zhao waved her fist and said to Lu Che, "Brother Lu Che, put in more effort." Yang Guang desperately and skillfully crouched in the corner holding his head. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Zhao Bainan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Zhao Bainan. Qin Nan limped and struggled up the stairs, feeling a sudden darkness around him, as if something was blocking the light above the stairs. He looked up and saw a young man with long black hair tied up in a ponytail, lazily sitting above the stairs, looking quite bored. The boy also noticed Qin Nan and looked at his disheveled figure with a rather shy smile. As for whether it was mockery or the shyness of seeing strangers, Qin Nan couldn't tell. Qin Nan and the young man looked at each other for a moment. The young man had no intention of giving way and couldn't help but say, "Are you also here to make things difficult for me?" Qin Nan now dare not underestimate the person in front of him at all. He has learned from his past experiences and understands that the combat effectiveness of a person in the Death Soul Tower cannot be measured by their height, and physique. The young man suddenly stood up. He was not tall, even just right up to Qin Nan's chin, but his figure still looked so slender. At the same time, Qin Nan also saw his appearance clearly. This young man was even more delicate than an average woman, with delicate and smooth skin. If it weren't for a hint of heroism between his eyebrows, he would have thought he was a woman disguised as a man. In front of this young man, Qin Nan felt ashamed for the first time, but he still found a hint of confidence from his height of only about 1.7 meters. The young man finally spoke with a sticky voice, and it was impossible to distinguish his gender solely by listening to his voice. Qin Nan heard his voice and was somewhat skeptical. Is this the man's voice? Can a man have such a voice? The young man saw that Qin Nan seemed to be distracted and couldn't help but feel a little angry. He shouted, "What are you doing?" "It's nothing." Qin Nan certainly wouldn't tell him, but upon hearing his voice, certain images came to mind. Qin Nan is in the middle of his body. After Yang Guang opened his eyes, he found that everyone else was practicing and felt a bit bored, but he didn't dare to speak out, afraid of waking them up. He suddenly saw Qin Nan's face at this moment, then looked at the exquisitely looking young man across from Qin Nan, and chuckled in a low voice. It seems that he is also from the same path. A real man is like this. Don't worry about gender barriers. Ying Zheng seemed to feel something. He opened his eyes and looked at Yang Guang in the corner, feeling that his gaze towards Qin Nan was somewhat strange. Yang Guang noticed that Ying Zheng had been staring at him since he woke up, and his heart furrowed like a frightened deer. He quickly closed his eyes and pretended to be practicing seriously. Ying Zheng didn't care about Yang Guang, just glanced casually. Suddenly, Ying Zheng stood up and stared at the young man in front of Qin Nan. Why is it so familiar? It seemed like something was coming to my mind, and my whole body couldn't help but feel a sudden surge of immense power emanating from me. Looking at the young man, my gaze was also filled with surprise. Lu Che felt the sudden burst of power from Ying Zheng and opened his eyes to catch a glimpse of the young man in front of Qin Nan. After careful reading for a while, he seemed to understand that there were many books documenting Ying Zheng in his era, and he also knew some of his secrets. Interesting, he said. Li Er chuckled a few times, but he couldn't see it, so he had to turn his head and coldly gaze at Wu Zhao next to him again. Although Wu Zhao was filled with curiosity and wanted to ask, she felt that Li Er's gaze was always on her and could only endure her curiosity without opening her eyes. She did not want to face Li Er. In the staircase, Qin Nan suddenly realized, why am I afraid of him? So he looked at the delicate face of the young man and said, I'm asking you, do you also want to fight with me? Originally, I was worried that he would come and cause trouble. The young man was no longer angry and immediately smiled. I don't want to fight with you, and you think I want to come find you. Qin Nan was a bit puzzled and said, don't trouble me. So why are you looking for me? Of course, I only come to you when I have something to do. Do you have anything to do with me? Just, what's up, you're talking about it. If there's anything, just let me know. I know what I can do to resolve this matter with you. The young man was a bit confused by Qin Nan's approach, and immediately reacted and interrupted him, saying, are you mocking me? Qin Nan innocently spread out his hand, feeling a bit inexplicable. He just asked him what was going on, how could it be a mockery? He said, no, I just want to know what you're doing with me. Seeing Qin Nan's sincere expression, the young man also felt a bit sensitive. It was because of his slow reaction that he was often mocked, which led to the misunderstanding that Qin Nan was mocking him. The boy finally remembered what he wanted to say, what's your name? My name is Zhao Bainan. Just call me Bainan. Qin Nan doesn't care what the young man's name is, even if he's beautiful, he has nothing to do with himself. Just ask me my name. My name is Qin Nan. Alright, can you move away if you have nothing to do? I also need to go back to the dormitory to apply medicine. Zhao Bainan wrinkled her nose and quickly explained, I came to see you because someone asked me to practice spiritual power with you. That's why I came to see you. Practicing with you. Why? You think I want to? If it weren't for her saying that practicing spiritual energy with you would accelerate my cultivation speed, would you consider me willing to practice with you? Qin Nan was surprised and said, what? Really? Qin Nan urgently wants to enhance his strength, not only for the deep hatred of his parents, but also to avoid being bullied. Zhao Bainan said, she said we can practice together as quickly as possible. I don't want to stay in this ghostly place anymore. I want to break through the waiting state as soon as possible, otherwise I won't come looking for you. Who is she? Zhao Bainan thought for a moment and said, I can't tell you. Besides, do you have any value in being deceived? You even suspect me. Qin Nan is not angry about Zhao Bainan's words, and he does not believe that he has any value in being deceived. Whether Zhao Bainan's words are true or false, they are just for practicing together and will not lose anything. Okay, when I feel the spiritual power, I'll come find you to give it a try. If it doesn't work, don't disturb me in the future. Zhao Bainan was quite dissatisfied with Qin Nan's statement and said, if it doesn't work, it's up to you not to bother me. I'm sick, so entangled with a man. I'll leave first. Zhao Bainan didn't know what was on her mind, but suddenly her face turned red. She ignored Qin Nan and hurriedly walked upstairs. Qin Nan looked at Zhao Bainan's departing figure and secretly thought to himself, if Zhao Bainan is telling the truth, then as long as we practice together, we will be closer and closer to revenge. Whether it's true or false, the kingdom organization. You must wait for me. At this moment, Zhao Bainan suddenly stopped and looked down at Qin Nan against the light. Before leaving, I'll give you some advice. In the Dead Soul Tower, we rely only on ourselves, and no one will help you for no reason. Backed by the mountain will fall. By water, water will flow. Moreover, in the Death Soul Tower, strength speaks for itself and hypocrisy is useless here. If you want to cultivate with peace of mind, only by making them all afraid of you can you avoid what you just encountered. So, in the future, don't disturb our cultivation because of some lock issues. You don't care, I can't do it. After speaking, Zhao Bainan's figure disappeared. Afraid of me? Qin Nan murmured and immediately clenched his fists. I wanted to make them all afraid of me, so that I could practice with peace of mind. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to practice with peace of mind even if I was constantly disturbed by them. The next day, Qin Nan woke up to the sound of a bell, lost in bed for a moment, and then realized that he was on the island of the dead soul, no longer the warm home he used to be. Qin Nan thought of what the instructor had said last night, quickly washed up, put on a grey robe, and arrived at the square downstairs. Not long after Qin Nan arrived, others also arrived one after another. At this moment, the figure of the instructor also appeared in the square, and the originally noisy crowd suddenly quieted down. The instructor looked at the crowd and confirmed that everyone had arrived before speaking up. "Great, no one was late. It seems that the surprise we prepared for you won't be useful. So now I'm giving you the first lesson. Why do you need to strengthen your physique? Being able to come to the Dead Soul Island indicates that you all contain spiritual power within your body, but because your body is too weak, you cannot feel it. Practicing is not only about cultivating spiritual power, but also about enhancing physical fitness. Now, everyone run around the square for me. Keep running." I didn't say, "Stop." No one is allowed to stop. Qin Nan and his group began to run around the square in response to the voice of the instructor. The square is also 600 meters long, and because it is our first time running together, and because we don't know how long it will take, everyone is preserving their energy, so the formation of the group is scattered and sparse. The instructor roared angrily, "So slow. Don't even want to eat. People who want to eat should accelerate for me. Only those who satisfy me can go eat, otherwise they will keep running for me." Upon hearing the instructor's words, Qin Nan and others could only run with all their might. 1 circle, 2 circles, 3 circles. Qin Nan doesn't know how many laps he has run. The young child was already called to the cafeteria by the instructor for a meal, leaving only Qin Nan and a few 15-year-old boys still running. "Alright, you can also go eat now." I don't know how long it has been, but the voice of the instructor came to Qin Nan's ears like a heavenly melody. Qin Nan felt weak all over, his legs and feet were sore and weak, and he lay on the ground, panting heavily. The figure of the instructor appeared above Qin Nan, completely covering the narrow sky that was originally visible at the top of the tower. He looked at Qin Nan coldly and said, "Who told you to lie down? I told you to go eat. It's not lying down. Do you still want to continue running?" Qin Nan stood up as if receiving an electric shock and shook his head vigorously at the instructor. "What are you waiting for? You're not going to eat yet." Qin Nan nodded like a chicken pecking at rice and rushed towards the direction of the cafeteria. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Mad Dog and Girl. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Mad Dog and Girl. After finishing his meal, Qin Nan walked out of the cafeteria with a satisfied expression on his face. Suddenly, his footsteps stopped because he noticed 2 thin figures nearby. The prominent yellow hair on the head of the relatively thin and weak man, combined with the rare fat man next to him, all these characteristics tell him that these 2 people are undoubtedly the ones who bullied him yesterday. Qin Nan remembered what Zhao Bainan had said. In the Death Soul Tower, only strength is everything. If you don't want to be delayed by trivial matters during cultivation, you must have absolute strength and make others afraid of you. Qin Nan looked at the backs of the 2 and pondered. He had already formed a grudge against them and would inevitably be entangled by them in the future. Qin Nan did not want to be unable to focus on his cultivation due to some miscellaneous matters. He suddenly thought of a customer in his parents' restaurant before. He was not strong, but the people around him were very afraid of him because he was a mentally ill person who went crazy and didn't want to die. Once he was provoked, it was difficult to get rid of him. Someone accidentally provoked that person, and finally, after reporting to the police, the person was sent to a mental hospital by the police before calming down. Qin Nan's eyes lit up. In fact, what scares people is not just their strong strength, but also the reckless madman. Even if you can easily solve this madman, you still don't want to provoke him because of trouble. Madmen don't know what fear is. As the saying goes, the soft are afraid of the hard are afraid of the poor are afraid of the horizontal are afraid of the stunned are afraid of the insignificant, and the insignificant are afraid of the shameless. He, who currently lacks strength, can only cultivate with peace of mind and ensure that he is not troubled by distractions by becoming a crazy person who is both hard, horizontal, and stunned, without losing his face. Only in this way can he reach the standard of Dead Soul Island in the remaining 2 years and not be erased by spiritual power. Thinking of this, Qin Nan decided to become a madman. He only had 2 years, and he couldn't afford to waste a single penny. It didn't matter if he went crazy for 2 years to seek revenge. So he took a deep breath and imitated the person in his memory, with a fierce expression and a look of madness in his eyes. He silently rushed towards the nearby Huang Mao and Fat Man. Huang Mao and Fatty have been staying on Dead Soul Island for many years. Although their strength does not meet the requirements of Dead Soul Island, they are not weak either. They can naturally reflect on Qin Nan's raid. As Huang Mao and the chubby body rushed towards Qin Nan, they gently avoided each other, causing Qin Nan to crash into the air and fall heavily to the ground. Qin Nan didn't care either. Instead, he gave them a silly smile, then got up and casually waved his self-created Wang Ba Quan towards the two of them. Huang Mao's mind is a bit confused. How could this kid dare to suddenly attack himself? He's not going to die anymore. I was thinking of insulting Qin Nan for a few words, but I didn't expect Qin Nan to attack him again. Huang Mao's anger rose in his heart, and he asked the fat man to step aside, preparing to teach him a good lesson this time. Huang Mao faced Qin Nan, who was once again protruding in front of him, and lifted his foot, like a long whip, pulling Qin Nan away. Before Qin Nan could react, Huang Mao quickly followed and raised his foot high again, kicking Qin Nan's abdomen again, flipping him to the ground, and then fiercely patching up 2 kicks. Huang Mao stepped on Qin Nan and turned his head proudly to look at the crowd around him, his face full of arrogance. Seeing a passing instructor not far away, with a wave of yellow hair on his feet and a chubby man, he prepared to leave. Just as he was about to step forward, he noticed Qin Nan tightly holding onto his feet and not letting him leave. Huang Mao struggled a few times, but couldn't break free. So he kicked Qin Nan hard again, but Qin Nan still held onto his feet tightly without any intention of letting go. Huang Mao kicked Qin Nan wildly. When he was tired from kicking and began to pant heavily, Qin Nan's hands were no longer strong. He broke free from Qin Nan's hands and gave him a fierce warning with a fierce gaze before preparing to leave. Qin Nan, who was lying on the ground, was covered in dust and footprints all over his body. He looked weakly at him with yellow hair, blue nose and swollen face, and a silly smile squeezed out on his face. Then he stood up unsteadily, and Huang Mao's incredulous eyes pounced again in front of him, weakly raising his fist to beat him. Feeling powerless with his fists, Qin Nan simply bit Huang Mao's neck with a fierce look, as if he was about to bite him to death. Huang Mao's face turned green as he watched Qin Nan's actions. The fat man beside him was stunned and quickly pulled Qin Nan away, then pulled Huang Mao away from here. Huang Mao's head was still a bit hazy. He felt like he had encountered a madman. It was normal to be bullied in the Death Soul Tower, and almost everyone had experienced it. Almost all bullied people waited until their strength was strong before choosing revenge. The person who is retaliated against is not only not angry, but also very proud, because this means that his vision is good. This is the hidden rule in Dead Soul Island. The higher the achievements of the people you have bullied in the future, the more glorious you will be. This rule is even accepted by the instructors and island owners on Dead Soul Island. For those who lack talent, they may never be able to stand at the top of the world for a lifetime, but when they grow old, they can boast to future generations that someone has been taught a lesson by them, and then drink a small glass of wine in the admiration of future generations. For those who are bullied, strive to cultivate in shame and let go of the lazy thoughts in their hearts. So this is a win-win unwritten rule. Huang Mao saw Qin Nan's crazy behavior today and realized that he might have offended a madman. Moreover, this madman did not have the idea of a gentleman seeking revenge for 10 years, but rather did not seek revenge overnight. Huang Mao felt a little weak in his heart, worried that Qin Nan would come to find him again in the future. So he broke free from the chubby man's hand and sternly said to Qin Nan, "Kid, I advise you not to waste your energy. Come back to me when you have achieved your cultivation." Huang Mao saw Qin Nan's unmoved expression, as if struggling to stand up and charging towards him again. Huang Mao didn't want to stay here anymore, but he still felt a little uneasy at the thought of Qin Nan's madness. Looking back, as expected, Qin Nan rushed towards him again. Huang Mao had no idea of teaching Qin Nan a lesson anymore. Instead, he ran away and didn't care about face. He was worried that one day he would be bitten to death by Qin Nan's crazy dog. Qin Nan burst into laughter when he saw the figure of Huang Mao fleeing in a disheveled state, laughing wildly and ferociously. The crowd around them looked at Qin Nan with strange eyes. Seeing Qin Nan's crazy appearance, they also felt a bit uneasy and remembered Qin Nan's appearance in their hearts, reminding themselves not to provoke this madman. On the railing of the 80th floor of the Dead Soul Tower, a young man with purple hair sat on the railing, his feet hanging in the air for several hundred meters. He looked down at Qin Nan downstairs and smiled, saying, "It's interesting." At this moment, a pleasant voice came from behind the purple-haired boy. "What's interesting?" The boy's smile froze when he heard the pleasant sound, as if he had encountered something terrifying, and his whole body was filled with excitement. Quickly jumping off the railing, he looked at the young girl behind him who was also handsome with short purple hair and said, "Sister, it's nothing, by the way, I remember something. I'll leave first." The girl did not stop him from leaving, looking at the young man's back and curling her lips. She walked to the railing, rested her hands on it, and looked down. Her gaze easily focused on Qin Nan, who was embarrassed but laughed arrogantly. The girl squinted her eyes as if she had discovered something fun. "Li Yu. I advise you not to have any thoughts about him." Zhao Bainan appeared behind the young girl Li Yu at some point. He was about to leave when he noticed Li Yu's figure, but suddenly noticed that her gaze towards Qin Nan was very strange, like seeing a mouse's cat, filled with thoughts of playing and teasing. Zhao Bainan was a bit worried that she would make things difficult for Qin Nan, so she couldn't help but voice a reminder. Li Yu didn't turn his head back and still looked at Qin Nan, saying, "What's wrong? Is he the person we White Lotus are interested in?" Zhao Bainan blushed slightly and immediately scolded, "Don't talk nonsense. I just know him, I'll tell you. Qin Nan is under my cover. You're not allowed to act recklessly. I feel sad when you say that. I was waiting for you to agree, but you ended up with a little white face, no. Little black face. But since it's the person you like, then I won't act recklessly." Li Yu turned around and came to Zhao Bainan's side, extending his delicate and tender palm to stroke her face. She saw Zhao Bainan's face full of suspicion, so she pretended to be aggrieved and said, "Bai Lianhua, is that how you mistrust others? I've said, as long as it's something you like, they will also like it." Zhao Bainan's face became blurry under Li Yu's touch, and became clear again with her caressed hand. But Zhao Bainan's reappeared face had undergone a change, although there was still room for imagination, it was almost the same as before. At this moment, the lines on Zhao Bainan's face became softer, her eyelashes became longer and more curved, and her skin was as white and tender as water. Her chest was slightly bulging, as if something had been stuffed in. Zhao Bainan is actually a girl. Zhao Bainan suddenly reacted and shyly patted off the hand that Li Yu had caressed on her face. With a hint of anger, she said, "Stay away from me, and also from Qin Nan." "Humph." Her voice is exactly the same as when she pretended to be a teenager. It is still so waxy and soft. When Li Yu's hand left Zhao Bainan's face, Zhao Bainan transformed back into a youthful appearance. She snorted coldly at Li Yu and then left without looking back. Li Yu looked at Zhao Bainan's back playfully, then looked at Qin Nan downstairs again and muttered to himself, "Sure enough, this Dead Soul Tower is becoming more and more interesting." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Cultivation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Cultivation. Qin Nan limped back to his dormitory once again, but this time no one jumped out to make things difficult for him, and even some apprentices took the initiative to avoid him. Some apprentices looked at Qin Nan with somewhat puzzled eyes. Why did they make way for a new student who was very skilled? At this point, the person next to him would explain to him, "This is a crazy dog. Don't get on him, if you get on him, you can't throw it away." He remembered Qin Nan's madness that day and still had lingering palpitations. The person who heard the explanation suddenly realized that their gaze towards Qin Nan was also extremely disdainful. Qin Nan and his like were the least popular and least wanted to be contacted in the Dead Soul Island, and no one wanted to be stuck with a piece of dog skin ointment. Qin Nan returned to his dormitory unharmed and threw himself heavily onto the bed. Thinking of the disdainful gazes around him, he didn't get angry, but instead burst out laughing happily. In the following month, the news that Qin Nan was a crazy dog spread among his apprentices, and no one bothered him anymore, delaying his cultivation. Of course, no one was close to him, resulting in him still having no friends. During this month, Qin Nan devoted himself every day to learning combat with the instructor and strengthening his physique. After class, he would also work hard and crazily exercise himself in the dormitory, until he drained the last bit of strength from his body before falling asleep on the bed. Seeing oneself gradually becoming stronger, this feeling is particularly intoxicating. 1 month later. In the square of the Dead Soul Tower, except for the two who had already given up, all the apprentices from the same group as Qin Nan gathered in the square, quietly watching the instructor ahead. Each of them has undergone visible changes, even girls are no exception, and each person's body has increased by 1 circle compared to before. Fortunately, the instructor explained that as long as they cultivate spiritual power, their body shape will gradually return to its original state, and now it is just a transition. Girls only agree to practice after hearing the instructor's explanation. Otherwise, due to their love for beauty, it doesn't matter whether they are strong or not. Beauty is the most important thing, and most girls may choose to give up practicing. Qin Nan surprisingly grew 5 centimeters tall in this month, reaching 1.83 meters at the age of 16, ranking among the top in the crowd. His muscles under his clothes also bulged, and his originally thin body now looks much thicker. He also propped up his previously loose clothes, like a male model in the human world. The instructor looked at the crowd who had turned the world upside down before, showing a satisfied smile and saying, "Great, your current appearance qualifies you to know my name. You used to be just a bunch of garbage." Although the apprentices were somewhat dissatisfied with the instructor's words, they did not become as noisy as before. "My name is Huang Yu, and I am the instructor specifically responsible for guiding new students in Dead Soul Island. Congratulations on not having to exercise crazily in the days to come." Before the apprentices could be happy, Huang Yu continued, "Your main task after that is to cultivate spiritual power, but I will also teach you fighting. You must remember. A strong physique will allow you to better feel the spiritual energy hidden within your body, and cultivate faster. Only when you have a guardian spirit in the future can you better let it exert its strength. I also need to cultivate and exercise my physique, and practice combat." When people heard Huang Yu's words, they kept roast. Huang Yu didn't know the people's roast. After saying that, he pointed to a young man in a black suit beside him and said, "This is the instructor who is responsible for guiding you to cultivate spiritual power, Instructor Hua. In the coming days, your course will be divided into 2 parts, with me in the morning. In the afternoon, Professor Hua will teach you how to cultivate spiritual power. Instructor Hua, please." Instructor Hua nodded at Huang Yu, walked forward, reached out a hand to gently smooth out the wrinkles on the suit, and even lifted the collar. "Hello everyone, I will teach you how to cultivate spiritual power within your body in the days to come." Instructor Hua noticed that Huang Yu was still on the side and couldn't help but turn his head to look at him. Huang Yu suddenly reacted and nodded apologetically. I'm sorry, I'll just say one last word and leave without disturbing Instructor Hua. Huang Yu said to Qin Nan and the others, your spiritual cultivation will start this afternoon, and the rest will be handed over to Instructor Hua. After Huang Yu finished speaking, he indeed turned around and left. At this moment, Instructor Hua coughed lightly twice, drawing everyone's attention back from Huang Yu's figure. You come with me. A group of people followed Instructor Hua to the cultivation area, which is dedicated to cultivating spiritual power for the people in the Dead Soul Island. Not only are they apprentices, but also the instructor. There are small training rooms for individual cultivation, medium-size training rooms for small teams to cultivate, and large training rooms exclusively for instructors to teach. In each cultivation room, there are spirit stones placed, which, when opened, can help practitioners better cultivate spiritual power. In a large training room, there are dozens of cattails placed inside, and Qin Nan and others sit cross-legged on the cattails according to the instructor's requirements. Instructor Hua saw that everyone was already seated and said, let me introduce you to the spirit sender first. The reason why a spirit sender is not only because there is a guardian spirit, but also because your body is naturally filled with spiritual energy, which cannot be artificially generated. People without spiritual energy are destined not to become spirit senders in their lifetime. Of course, even if you have spiritual power, it does not necessarily mean that you can become a spirit sender, because many of you will not be able to awaken your own guardian spirit until you die of old age, and spirit senders without a guardian spirit are ordinary people. Everyone present, upon hearing Instructor Hua's words, closely watched him for fear of missing an important piece of information, which would prevent them from becoming a spirit sender. Qin Nan, on the other hand, felt relieved. He had awakened his guardian spirit, but he didn't know how to communicate with him. As long as he could communicate with the guardian spirit, even if his spiritual power was not high, he could seek revenge. That's Qin Shi Huang. He must be very impressive. Perhaps some of you come from prestigious backgrounds and have incredibly powerful guardian spirits inside, but none of this is useful. Your spiritual power is not enough, even the strongest guardian spirit cannot exert its true strength. Instead, you will be killed by some ordinary guardian spirits. This situation has occurred many times, and it is pitiful that those powerful guardian spirits died so miserably. But, Instructor, what is a guardian spirit? Someone in the crowd asked Instructor Hua. Upon hearing this, Instructor Hua nodded and said, there are two types of guardian spirits. One is a spiritual body that is possessed by a certain medium. People with strong attachment have a nostalgic attachment to people or things after passing away, and their souls refuse to leave. This kind of guardian spirit exists in every human body, but whether you can awaken them depends on yourself. If you are unable to awaken the guardians within yourself, they will follow your bloodline and spread to your descendants until one of them awakens. Another type of guardian spirit is when you find the undead that can reach an agreement with you and let the yin and yang coexist, it becomes your guardian spirit. Do you have any other questions? Qin Nan raised his hand and asked Instructor Hua, Instructor Hua, I want to know how many guardian spirits a person can have. Qin Nan still remembers the night when the kingdom organized the attack. He clearly heard Zheng communicating with others, and at that time, his uncle did not come, so it is very likely that there were other guardians inside him. Inside Qin Nan's body, Wu Zhao heard Qin Nan's question and secretly looked at Li Er, who was still practicing. He whispered to Zheng, Brother Zheng, it seems that your descendants have discovered us. Lu Che disdainfully said, I haven't hidden anything from him. If I can't find out, what's the use of keeping him? Zheng wanted to speak up and praise Qin Nan, but when he saw Lu Che's expression, he remained silent. If he spoke up, he would be ridiculed by Lu Che's children, so it was better not to say it. At this moment, Wu Zhao said, Actually, today I found a woman who seems to be even better than Qin Nan. Her name seems to be Li Yu. Zheng looked at Wu Zhao with no emotion in his tone and said, What do you mean? Li Er seemed to have heard something too. He opened his eyes and looked at Wu Zhao with complex eyes. Apart from the Wu Zhao lineage, there were not many descendants left, all because of Wu Zhao's crazy massacre back then. Wu Zhao felt Li Er's gaze and also remembered his past actions. He stopped talking and quietly moved to a corner, silently starting to practice. At this moment, Yang Guang in the corner suddenly spoke to Wu Zhao and said, "Wu Zhao, shouldn't you also be the descendant of my daughter?" Before Yang Guang could finish speaking, he saw Wu Zhao's sharp gaze and immediately shut up. It was already a thing of the past for any daughter not to be a daughter. Every achievement of the emperors here is higher than him, so their soul power is also stronger than him. If they want to do anything to him, he has no resistance at all. In order to live a better life for himself in the future, he can only silently endure it. In the cultivation room, Instructor Hu heard Qin Nan's question and thought for a moment before saying, "Originally, this was not your concern, but I have decided to tell you that most people can only have one guardian spirit in their lifetime. However, there is a certain type of person who is naturally different and can have multiple guardian spirits. This type of person is very rare and has only appeared a few times in the history of Dead Soul Island, but in recent years, 2 have appeared consecutively. This kind of person, we call them the martial god body." Instructor Hu had no intention of telling Qin Nan and his team about those 2 martial god bodies, so he stopped asking questions. "Now, all of you close your eyes and start practicing spiritual power. Spiritual power exists deep within each of you, and you must concentrate your spiritual, physical, and courage senses to find a sense of calmness in order to feel the existence of spiritual power. This is the first and most difficult level for cultivating spiritual power. Countless apprentices in the Dead Soul Island are unable to feel their spiritual power even at the age of 18. Your daily task in the future is to feel the spiritual power within yourself. Now, give me peace of mind to practice." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Li Yu and Zhao Bainan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Li Yu and Zhao Bainan. Qin Nan strives to concentrate his spirit, body, and courage together, perceiving the spiritual power buried deep within his body. But he couldn't calm down in his heart, and every time he entered meditation, the situation of that night kept appearing before him, replaying it repeatedly. The silver mecha warrior in the face of his parents lying in a pool of blood. Qin Nan was trembling all over, unable to calm down anymore. Sweat soaked his clothes and gathered on the floor, forming a puddle of water. Instructor Hu frowned when he saw Qin Nan's situation. He reached out and pressed his hand on Qin Nan's head, and a spiritual force flowed into Qin Nan's body, awakening him from his memory. He is likely to have his mind disrupted and unable to calm down again when he is immersed in memories. Qin Nan felt the spiritual power appearing in his body and suddenly woke up, panting heavily and his eyes turning red. It was obvious that he had been blinded by hatred. Instructor Hu looked at him with no emotion in his eyes and a cold voice. "If you can't concentrate on perception, then wait for your memories to be erased and sent back to the human world at the age of 18, he said. "Everyone here has their own tragic stories, you are not special. They carry no less hatred than you, but they can force themselves to concentrate and cultivate diligently. Why are you immersed in hatred?" Qin Nan turned his head and sure enough, everyone except himself had already focused their perception and worked hard to feel the spiritual power inside their body. "I can definitely do it." He took a deep breath and looked at the instructor, saying, "I'm sorry, instructor." The instructor no longer paid attention to Qin Nan and continued to observe the other people's cultivation in the training room. Qin Nan closed his eyes again and began to concentrate his mind, body, and courage, feeling the spiritual power inside his body, forcing himself to no longer immerse himself in memories. The situation of that night once again appeared in Qin Nan's mind, with the firearm spraying in the desperate eyes of his parents. Qin Nan clenched his fists and worked hard to tell himself that he would seek revenge for his parents. "Don't immerse yourself in memories. Dad. Mom. Don't worry, I will not only live well, but also seek revenge for you. Finally, the image of all of this disappeared from my mind, and darkness surrounded me. Qin Nan stood alone in the darkness, his inner restlessness gradually calming down and entering a state of meditation. A faint light appeared above his head, although not large, so prominent in the pitch-black environment. Spiritual power. Qin Nan felt a surge of excitement in his heart. He knew that it was spiritual power, and as long as it came into contact with his body, he would feel spiritual power. Qin Nan's emotions fluctuated, and a sudden force of rejection emerged in the darkness, bringing him back into the real world. In the cultivation room, Qin Nan woke up again, but this time he didn't feel disappointed, but instead had a joyful expression on his face. I see spiritual power. Upon seeing Qin Nan's situation, Instructor Huo lightly curved the corner of his mouth before disappearing. He sternly said to Qin Nan, "What are you waiting for? Continue practicing." Qin Nan nodded heavily and closed his eyes, once again falling into cultivation. I don't know how long it was before the bell rang again, and all the apprentices in the training room were awakened by the sound of the bell. Instructor Huo looked at everyone and said, "Spiritual power is not so easy to cultivate. That's all for today. From now on, come to the training room every afternoon to meditate until you feel spiritual power. Everyone, let's finish class." Qin Nan walked out of the training room with the crowd, and the light in the darkness made him excited. He didn't even plan to have dinner and was ready to return to his dormitory to continue meditation. At the staircase, Huang Mao leaned against the wall and saw Qin Nan's figure. He sneered and said, "Kid. Last time you pretended to be crazy and fooled me over, which caused the old man to lose face. He didn't have such good luck today." Qin Nan felt uncomfortable and wanted to turn around and leave, but a chubby figure also appeared behind him. He didn't speak and looked at Qin Nan with a simple smile, his eyes full of ridicule. Cannot escape. Qin Nan told himself that if he begged for mercy or ran away, his name as a mad dog would prove to be a disguise. The group of apprentices who were deceived by him would become angry and find him, and he would not be able to rest in the future. Fight it. Qin Nan didn't say much to the two of them either. He punched heavily and swung his yellow-haired face, making a crazy look on his face, twisted into a ball with a ferocious expression. His strength now is not comparable to a month ago, it is twice as strong as before. Huang Mao seemed to feel that Qin Nan's strength was different from before. He took a step behind his right foot and forcefully stepped on the ground. Open your palms and head towards Qin Nan's fist, wrapping it around him and removing the force from his fist. Then he grabbed Qin Nan's fist and pulled him sideways. Qin Nan couldn't react and was pulled down. Huang Mao grinned and raised his foot, about to step on Qin Nan's face. Bang! Huang Mao was suddenly thrown away by a tremendous force, falling heavily onto the wall and slowly sliding onto the ground. Huang Mao covered his chest and looked at the red figure in front of Qin Nan, his voice trembling. "Li Liu, what are you doing?" Liu, standing in front of Qin Nan, had a teasing look in his eyes as he reached out to comb his messy short hair in his ear. "What do I want to do, Mississippi? I need to explain it to you," he said upon hearing Liu's words. Huang Mao stuttered and replied, "No, you don't need to explain it to me. So we can go now." NN. Huang Mao nodded repeatedly in agreement, gesturing for the fat man behind to quickly make way. The fat man reluctantly gave way and watched Liu leave with his limping Qin Nan, saying, "Why let him go?" Huang Mao slapped the fat man's head and said, "You're stupid. Of course you can't beat Liu." Oh. Qin Nan was taken by Liu to the top floor of the Dead Soul Tower before stopping his steps. Liu stood at the edge of the tower, facing the boundless sea with open arms, feeling the sea breeze blowing in his face, feeling very comfortable. After hesitating for a few moments, Qin Nan spoke up and said, "Why did you help me?" "For no reason, I just want to see what kind of person you are. Why could you take away my little white lotus soul?" Li Yu's voice was clear and pleasant, but her words left Qin Nan puzzled. Xiao Bailan. What is Xiao Bailan? Li Yu did not answer. You can leave now. What? You can go now. Qin Nan took a deep breath and felt inexplicable. Bring yourself here, yet let yourself go. Isn't this playing with me? Qin Nan didn't think much anymore, turned around and left the top of the tower. At the top of the Dead Soul Tower, Li Yu felt Qin Nan's departure and spoke out to the empty place beside him, Little Bailan, come out. Zhao Bainan was indeed there. He appeared in front of Li Yu, with a hint of anger in his voice. I told you not to entangle him. Li Yu, on the other hand, showed an innocent expression and said, they are just acting bravely for their righteousness. Is there anything wrong with them? You brought him here to tell me, didn't you keep an eye on him? Of course not. Zhao Bainan was a bit distressed and didn't know why Li Yu had been against her all along. Zhao Bainan suddenly thought of a possibility. Is she seeking revenge? 2 years ago in an afternoon, it was also here, on the top floor of the Dead Soul Tower. Li Yu, dressed in a red dress, swayed in the sea breeze at the hem, shyly expressing his admiration for the handsome Zhao Bainan. Zhao Bainan said helplessly, it's impossible for us. Li Yu widened his eyes in confusion and said, why? No, why not? You. Li Yu looked angrily at Zhao Bainan, who looked helpless. A girl's confession was rejected, which was a huge insult for her. Li Yu was also not hiding his true nature. He looked at Zhao Bainan like a queen and said, there is nothing that I, Li Yu, have never missed. Zhao Bainan, I'll give you 2 choices. 1. Be with me. 2. Be knocked down by me and then be with me. You choose. Zhao Bainan suddenly became speechless and didn't want to pay attention to Li Yu anymore. After turning around, he wanted to leave. Suddenly, he felt the movement behind him and turned to avoid it, only to find that Li Yu had actually taken action against him. Li Yu's strike fell through, and he lifted his right foot to continue frantically attacking Zhao Bainan. At the top of the Dead Soul Tower, 1 red and 1 white, 2 figures intertwined, cheering non-stop. Bang! Zhao Bainan was punched by Li Yu and fell to the ground. Li Yu looked down at Zhao Bainan, who was quite embarrassed, and said, how about it? Do you have a choice? You. Zhao Bainan didn't know what to say. On the first day he arrived at Dead Soul Island, he was entangled by Li Yu. He originally thought she was just a shy and delicate girl, but he didn't expect that everything was just her pretense. If you don't agree, I'll see you and hit you once in the future. Zhao Bainan was furious and said, you're not practicing anymore. Li Yu said nonchalantly, I am a genius. Zhao Bainan's chest kept fluctuating for a long time before speaking, Li Yu, we really can't do it. Li Yu curved the corner of his mouth and said, oh. Who are you interested in? Tell me. Unreasonable. Zhao Bainan took out her pendant from her chest and transformed into a girl in Li Yu's shocked gaze. Li Yu suddenly froze and foolishly reached out to pinch Zhao Bainan's chest twice, then reacted with a shy and angry scream. The figure disappeared at the top of the tower. Zhao Bainan stood up again, put on the pendant, transformed into a youthful appearance, sighed, and left the top of the tower. 3 days later, Zhao Bainan found a note in her dormitory, and the bright red handwriting made her dumbfounded. Zhao Bainan, I've been thinking for 3 days and finally figured it out. I don't mind if you're a girl. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Spiritual Power and the Way of Hell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Spiritual Power and the Way of Hell 3 months later. In the cultivation room, Qin Nan's eyes were tightly closed and he sat cross-legged on a cushion, focusing on perceiving and immersing himself in meditation, feeling the spiritual power inside his body. Qin Nan once again fell into a dark world, feeling the glimmer of light above his head and striving to get closer to it. After 3 months of effort, the distance between it and Qin Nan is within reach. During these 3 months, many apprentices who came to the Dead Soul Island with Qin Nan have gradually sensed spiritual power. If it had been before, Qin Nan would have felt anxious when he saw others leading him one by one. He has never been a person who is willing to follow others, but after a long period of meditation and spiritual training, he seems to have even improved his mental state a bit, without any anxious or panicked emotions. In the dark world, the little light above Qin Nan's head became closer and closer to him through his perception. Qin Nan did not anxiously stand up and actively try to approach it, but continued to concentrate on sensing and letting it approach him. Finally, that little light touched Qin Nan's body, reacting like Mars encountering gasoline, emitting a fierce light that turned the originally pitch-black space into a pure white one. In the cultivation room, Qin Nan opened his eyes with a joyful expression, his eyes filled with surprises. When that spot of light came into contact with him, he felt a force emerging from within, like a swimming fish constantly swimming throughout his body. I finally feel the spiritual power. Qin Nan was excited and wanted to scream loudly, but suddenly came to his senses and found himself still in the training room. Seeing the other meditating apprentices beside him, he quieted down again. Instructor Hua felt the fluctuation of spiritual power in Qin Nan's body. After Qin Nan woke up, he said, "Congratulations, you have successfully felt spiritual power." "Thank you, instructor." Qin Nan's voice was filled with uncontrollable joy. "Let's go to the small training room next to us, don't disturb the other apprentices." In the small training room, Instructor Hua congratulated Qin Nan once again before saying, "You have now felt your spiritual power and officially become a true spirit sender. Of course, you cannot relax your cultivation of spiritual power in the future. When your spiritual power reaches the level of equal vitality, it means that you have met the requirements of the Dead Soul Island. At that time, you were a true soul-suppressing general, qualified to guard a soul-suppressing street that belonged to you." Qin Nan asked Instructor Hua about his doubts and said, "Wait a minute. Instructor Hua, are spiritual powers still graded?" "Of course. Everything in the world will be divided into different levels, and the spiritual realm also distinguishes the level of the sender, which we call the hellish path. Listen carefully, I will now give you a detailed introduction to the division of the underworld." Qin Nan sat upright upon hearing the words, concentrating and perking up his ears. The underworld is divided into 8 realms. Waiting for life, black rope, unity, shouting, great shouting, scorching heat, great scorching heat, and boundless. Qin Nan exclaimed in surprise, "Is waiting for life actually the lowest level?" Instructor Hua didn't care either, smiled and explained, "Don't underestimate the level of waiting for life. Among the many apprentices in the Dead Soul Island, there aren't many who can reach the level of waiting for life at the age of 18. Although the spiritual realm is only a channel connecting the underworld and the human realm, the spiritual realm is also very large, and the Soul Town Street is the channel connecting the spiritual realm with the human realm. There are countless soul streets connected to the human realm in the spiritual realm. Countless soul generals die or are born every day in these soul streets, so the demand for soul generals in the spiritual realm can never be met. Due to the scarcity of the soul street, for the safety of the undead, the spirit domain will not allow you to cultivate to a certain level with peace of mind. In the future, you can only continue to cultivate and improve in your own soul street. The reason why you can become a soul-suppressing general by waiting for the living realm is that you can initially control the guardian spirit by waiting for the living realm, and having a guardian spirit means that you have the capital to fight against evil spirits. After experiencing the spiritual power, you no longer need to go to the large cultivation room to practice. You can practice on your own in the small cultivation room. There is no shortcut to cultivating spiritual power, and one can only follow a routine and accumulate it day and night. Now is the stage for you to experience the cultivation alone in the Soul Town Street in advance. Of course, if you have any questions, you can always come to me. Qin Nan's body. Wu Zhao felt the spiritual energy in Qin Nan's body, her eyes lit up, and she excitedly said, "I can finally go out. Brother Zheng, can you let me go out first?" In order to see the outside world first, Wu Zhao even gave up calling me and looked eagerly at Zheng, hoping that he could agree to her request. Although Wu Zhao is an emperor, she is also a girl. She has been living in a pitch-black world for thousands of years and is extremely eager to see the vibrant world outside again. Upon hearing Wu Zhao's words, Li Er's previously warm smile disappeared instantly. "Can you give it a try?" Wu Zhao frowned slightly and turned her head to see who dared to speak to her like that. Suddenly, she froze and thought that there seemed to be only Yang Guang and Li Er behind her, and Yang Guang didn't dare to talk to her like that. So thinking of this, Wu Zhao's originally angry mood instantly faded away, pretending that nothing had happened before. She closed her eyes again and began practicing, as if she had never made a request to Zheng. Zheng glanced at Li Er and said, "Someone must go out and accompany Qin Nan to fight together." "Who are you going to?" Zheng glanced at the mixed reputation emperors in front of him, hoping that some of them could take the initiative. Wu Zhao had already volunteered to take on this task, but unfortunately was stopped by Li Er. Lu Che turned a deaf ear to Zheng's words. He always does things according to his heart, and whatever Zheng wants to do, he does the opposite. Li Er still had a warm smile on his face, looking at Zheng with a smile and not speaking. He felt like he had lost his memory for scolding Wu Zhao just now. Wu Zhao was restless and always wanted to take the initiative to step forward, but when she saw Li Er laughing beside her, the words she had originally intended to blurt out were taken back into her stomach. Zheng glanced around and saw that no one had taken the initiative to step forward. He nodded and said, "All right, then let Yang Guang handle this task." "What?" Yang Guang in the corner suddenly froze, not expecting this task to fall on his head. He didn't want to fight with Qin Nan in his heart, which made him feel very embarrassed. Although his reputation had long been ruined by his son-in-law Li Er, he was still a majestic emperor. How could I play with a child and be his nanny? Yang Guang turned his gaze to Li Er, hoping that he could stand up and help him speak for the sake of his own daughter and relatives, but Li Er didn't know when he had already closed his eyes and immersed himself in cultivation. Yang Guang's pleading gaze wandered around, but no one spoke for him. Even Lu Che remained silent. As Zheng said, there must always be someone to accompany Qin Nan in battle. Anyway, he won't go. What? You don't want to? Zheng's gaze flickered with a strange light, staring closely at Yang Guang, as if he was ready to take action at any time after he refused. Yang Guang wanted to open his mouth several times to refuse, but when he saw the flickering light in Zheng's eyes, he couldn't say what was already on his lips and could only nod in agreement with grievances. Zheng nodded in satisfaction and gave Yang Guang an approving glance before ignoring him. He sat down and closed his eyes to continue practicing. However, Lu Che suddenly opened his eyes and looked fiercely at Yang Guang in the corner. He reached out and casually sorted out the messy crown in front of him, then slowly stood up and walked towards Yang Guang. Understanding leads to understanding, but agreeing with Zheng's demands still requires punishment. The next afternoon, Qin Nan found Zhao Bainan waiting for him on his way to the small training room. "What are you doing? Have you already felt the spiritual power?" After seeing Qin Nan nod, Zhao Bainan continued, "Didn't I say that we should practice together when you feel the spiritual energy?" Qin Nan suddenly remembered that Zhao Bainan had once said that if they practiced spiritual power together, the speed of spiritual power enhancement would also increase significantly, and his heart was moved. "Why don't you give it a try?" Qin Nan hesitated for a moment and said, "Let's give it a try first. If my spiritual power hasn't increased, then we better not meet again." Mei waited for Qin Nan to finish speaking, and Zhao Bainan interjected in a loud voice. Qin Nan nodded naturally and said, "That's right." In a small training room, Qin Nan and Zhao Bainan sat opposite each other, but did not practice. Instead, They looked at each other helplessly and remained silent for a long time. Zhao Bainan, you suggested practicing together, so how should we practice together? Is it a double cultivation? I don't want to practice with a man. Who? Zhao Bainan blushed slightly and said, who wants to practice with you? I just don't know how to practice specifically. Why don't we each practice like this and give it a try? Qin Nan could only reluctantly nod and agree. Both of them closed their eyes and fell into meditation. In the small cultivation room, the fist-sized, milky white, and pure spirit stones are embedded on the roof, constantly emitting spiritual energy into the cultivation room. While the two were still meditating, a huge figure silently appeared behind Qin Nan, dressed in a black dragon robe embroidered with a golden dragon. His gaze was obscured by the 12 Mian imperial edicts, making it impossible to see clearly. He exuded boundless power all the time. Zheng appeared in the cultivation room, his gaze fixed on Zhao Bainan, and his mind was filled with thoughts. After a long time, he spoke up, Ah Fong, come out. I know it's you. The cultivation room was peaceful, and after Zheng spoke, nothing happened. Zheng was certain that the person was inside Zhao Bainan's body, but she still didn't want to meet him. With a hint of sadness in his eyes, he whispered, it has been so many years since national enemies and family grudges last. Can't you let go? My great Qin has already fallen. Is it not enough? Can't you come out and meet me for a long time? Nothing happened. Zheng's eyes were filled with disappointment, and he closed them in agony as his figure slowly dissipated into the small training room. After Zheng's figure disappeared, a mournful sigh from within Zhao Bainan's body was heard as a woman. Sigh. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Revenge is Revenge. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Revenge is Revenge in a small cultivation room. Qin Nan woke up from his cultivation and felt an increase in spiritual power in his body. He looked at Zhao Bainan with surprise and said, the speed of spiritual power cultivation has really accelerated a bit. Zhao Bainan also showed a happy expression on her face. Due to the difference in realm, the spiritual power added to her body was not obvious, but it still increased slightly compared to before when she practiced alone. Zhao Bainan covered her mouth and didn't let herself laugh. After a while, she calmed down and said, Qin Nan, I'll be waiting for you here every afternoon from now on. Is that okay? Qin Nan was quite disgusted by Zhao Bainan's gesture of covering her mouth, but did not refuse. No problem, but can you stop doing such a motherly move in the future? Upon hearing this, Zhao Bainan's smile froze instantly, ignoring Qin Nan. She stood up on her own and left the cultivation room. Seeing Zhao Bainan leave with some anger, Qin Nan didn't care either. In his concept, men can have a weaker temperament, but they absolutely cannot be women. Thinking of practicing with Zhao Bainan every day in the future, he couldn't bear it and made up his mind to help him correct it. Qin Nan stood up and prepared to leave, casually waving his fists a few times, feeling that his strength had more than doubled compared to before, and he was no longer much weaker than that yellow-haired one. A gentleman seeks revenge 10 years later, while a villain seeks revenge all day long. Qin Nan decided to find an opportunity to teach Huang Mao a good lesson and not let the crazy dog persona that was finally established collapse like this. In the following days, Qin Nan kept searching for Huang Mao's trace while practicing, but unfortunately did not find him. On this day, after being educated by Qin Nan again, Zhao Bainan angrily stood up and left. Qin Nan immediately walked out of the cultivation room, and suddenly, his footsteps stopped. He unexpectedly found Huang Mao walking out of the cultivation room next to him, chatting and laughing with his chubby figure who was inseparable. Qin Nan immediately decided to follow up and find a fierce opportunity to teach him a lesson, and also to dispel the thoughts of those apprentices who wanted to trouble him in crowded places. Last time Huang Mao came to trouble him, he was stopped by the girl named Liu, but his behavior has led many people to suspect that he is pretending to be crazy and foolish. These days, Qin Nan always felt that there was a hint of restlessness in the eyes they looked at him, as if he wanted to teach him a lesson by pretending to be crazy and deceiving them. Although Qin Nan is not afraid of them at all, with so many people coming to trouble him day and night, he still needs to practice. The time for breakthrough would greatly increase. Qin Nan remained calm and followed Huang Mao all the way to the square in the center of the Soul Tower. The square is bustling with people coming and going, and there are also some apprentices bullying people in the corner. A large group of people have already gathered around them to watch the excitement. That's it. Qin Nan no longer hesitated, his spiritual energy running through his body, and he suddenly felt like his whole body was filled with explosive power. Kicking the ground with both feet, the body approaches yellow hair like a shell. Huang Mao didn't react at all. It was only when Qin Nan's powerful foot was about to touch his body that he realized it. But it was too late, so Huang Mao was kicked out by Qin Nan in the shocked eyes of the fat man next to him, hitting the crowd in front of him. The onlookers were blinded by the yellow hair falling from the sky, and stood up with a grin on their faces. They watched him for a moment, then raised their fists and landed on yellow hair, venting their dissatisfaction. The fat man originally wanted to catch Qin Nan, who had already turned around and fled, but when he saw Huang Mao being beaten by a group of people, he hesitated for a moment and could only let Qin Nan escape and rush over to save Huang Mao, who had been surrounded and beaten by the crowd. After a commotion, Huang Mao and the chubby man sat in a corner of the square, disheveled and bruised. Huang Mao carefully touched the wound on his face and immediately hissed when he felt the pain. He quickly moved his hand and said fiercely, "That kid. How dare he sneak attack me?" The chubby face on the side, which was originally chubby, now looks like a pig's head, almost swollen in a circle compared to before. His voice became even deeper, and he said in a muffled voice, "Why did that kid suddenly become stronger, and his strength is also so great? Is it? He feels spiritual power." The fat man and Huang Mao looked at each other for a while before the fat man spoke up, "What should we do? That kid can feel spiritual power so quickly. It seems that his talent is very strong, and he must be able to surpass us soon. When he comes to us again, we have no resistance at all. What should we do?" Huang Mao also had a headache and didn't know what to do. If he were to get into trouble with other highly talented apprentices, they would at most stop paying attention to him after their strength surpassed theirs. But Qin Nan is different. He is completely a crazy dog, and whenever he finds a chance, he uses mean tricks on him. Now Huang Mao has no doubt about Qin Nan's claim that he is a crazy dog. Who dares to take the initiative to find the other person repeatedly, even though they know they are not against them? This is not crazy, what is it? After thinking for a long time, Huang Mao sighed and said, "Since we can't afford it, let's stay away and run away when we see him. Just don't let him catch us." The fat man nodded repeatedly in agreement. The two of them looked at each other's disheveled appearance and let out a long sigh, then helped each other up and left the square in the strange eyes of the apprentices around them. In front of the dormitory door, Huang Mao was alone, holding the wall with one hand and holding the key in his pocket with the other. He and the chubby man's dormitory were not in transit. On the first floor, the fat man had already returned to his dormitory to apply medicine and heal his injuries. Huang Mao took out the key and inserted it into the lock hole. Suddenly, he felt a tremendous force coming from behind, and his body collided heavily with the door. The already painful wound on his body was even worse. Ah! Huang Mao was already powerless to struggle, sliding slowly against the door and falling to the ground. He knew it must be Qin Nan, and struggled to turn his head to beg Qin Nan for mercy, but behind him was already empty. Huang Mao collapsed to the ground in despair, looking at the blue sky exposed from the top of the tower. The chubby man was applying medicine in the dormitory with his bare arms when he suddenly heard a scream coming from upstairs. He immediately recognized it as a yellow-haired cry. Listening to Huang Mao's screams, the fat man tightly closed his eyes and did not rush out to help him in the first place. He just silently prayed for him in his heart and wished him good luck. Fortunately, Huang Mao stopped him earlier. After Qin Nan scolded Huang Mao again, he felt happy and hummed a tune all the way back to his dormitory. He had always felt like he was holding his breath deep in his heart, and now he finally vented it with pleasure. In an instant, his body felt even lighter than before. Before finding the kingdom organization, it's also good to practice with those two boys. Inside Qin Nan's body, Zheng frowned and saw the entire process of Qin Nan's fight against Huang Mao. He was somewhat dissatisfied and said, "The emperor should be upright and upright, how could he be like a mischievous scoundrel?" Upon hearing Zheng's words, Lu Che beside him immediately exclaimed, "Zheng, who are you mocking?" Originally, Zheng didn't even think of Lu Che. When he heard Lu Che's questioning, he suddenly reacted and didn't explain. Instead, he sneered and said, "You still have some self-awareness." Lu Che laughed angrily and said, "Yes, the fact that Poppy defeated the emperor in the end proves that Poppy is more domineering than any emperor. This is a fact that has already existed in history." Zheng clenched his fist tightly, his whole body constantly trembling. "What? You want to fight? I'm afraid you won't succeed." Lu Che saw Zheng's appearance without any illusions. They are all emperors with great achievements in history, revered by all the people of China, with comparable soul power, and no one is afraid of anyone. Li Er, who was standing beside him, suddenly spoke up and said, "Do you have me?" "Yeah, there seems to be one of them who is even more miserable than the two of them, and was defeated by a woman, even worse than being naughty." Thinking of this, Zheng's pent-up emotions dissipated and he no longer argued with Lu Che. Lu Che saw that Zheng had no intention of fighting, so he sat down. After all, fighting between the two emperors was too shameful, and there were also a few younger generations watching from the side. Wu Zhao, who was originally looking good at the show, suddenly heard Li Er speak and knew she was going to be bad. When Li Er said he was even more miserable than Zheng, Wu Zhao was a bit dissatisfied. In the end, she returned the entire Tang Empire to their Li family, didn't she? How could you still say that about her? However, Wu Zhao still remained silent. Although she is the only female emperor in history, she is still slightly inferior to Li Er in terms of soul power, otherwise Wu Zhao pretended to be immersed in cultivation, as if unaware of everything happening outside. In her mind, she was fantasizing about how to teach Li Er a lesson after his soul power surpassed Li Er's. She seemed to think of something fun and almost burst out laughing as she entertained herself. Li Er's original gaze was tightly focused on Wu Zhao, but suddenly he felt a gaze coming from the corner and turned his head suddenly. Before Yang Guangxing could restrain his expression of pleasure from disaster, Li Er discovered it and exclaimed in his heart, "It's over." Don't look at Li Er as his son-in-law, but Li Er is so ruthless that he doesn't even let go of his own brothers. Sure enough, Li Er put away his bitter and hostile gaze and instead looked at Yang Guang with a smile. He rolled up the long sleeves of his dragon robe with both hands and walked towards Yang Guang. At this moment, Li Er is extremely grateful to his father for improving his dragon robe, otherwise it would be as cumbersome as the dragon robes of Zheng and Lu Che, which would greatly affect his performance. End of this chapter.